every day choosing to be slightly better than the day before in some way. However small or insignificant it may feel, just making those changes and those iterations on a daily basis to compound, in a year, or 5 years, or 10 years, how much better you're going to be if you make these small changes to be better. And so for me, I'm obsessive over the idea that you can always be better. I don't care how well you're doing in business. I don't care how well a process is working. I don't care how good a new CRM looks and how shiny it is. We can always make it better. And so I think my mind gets cluttered with finding these cool opportunities, and probably no different than a lot of entrepreneurs chasing that, exciting new shiny thing. I think it's more about figuring out what's the most impactful, scalable, holistic thing that really needs to be focused on, and only choosing 3 of those instead of 10 of them.
Welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is Gene Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow? Time is precious. Your time is precious. When you think about how you spend your time, do you feel like you've got it under control? Or maybe control is the wrong word. Do you feel optimized to the level that you want? Well, odds are that many times you don't feel as optimized as you could be. In fact, many times you may feel like you're behind. You may feel like you're always trying to catch up. The struggle is real. It's not just your calendar. It's not just your email. Optimizing your time is really about how you are showing up as a leader and how intentional you are about this. Today, we're going to be looking at what's one thing that one leader has done that really has changed the game, but also dive deeper into where he's shifting. So specifically, we are with Jeff Knauss. He is the CEO of Digital Hyve. They have grown 13,000% in the last 6 years, 54 employees. And one of the things he's focused on right now and has made the biggest difference in his time is looking at how he best works. In fact, he talks about how the day-to-day versus the project work and which one is better for him. I'm kind of curious, which do you think is better for you? The day-to-day, going to meetings and all the stuff that you do day in and day out? Or is it the project work? Where are you adding the most value? Well, inside this episode, Jeff shares exactly what he's seen when he looks back at how he adds the most value to his company. We also talk about where he's evolving. He's got a lot of projects that are on the horizon. And how does he organize those? How does he know what to attack first? Well, that's the coaching section that we do today, where I dive into it, help him really create some clarity around how to filter those projects out and what he can do so that he can stay on track with it and optimize his time to the next level. There's a lot more details inside this episode with Jeff. So here is the interview and the coaching session with Jeff Knauss, CEO of Digital Hyve. Jeff, how are you?
Hey, Gene, not too bad. How are you, man?
Second time being on the show. I appreciate you sharing your time and wisdom with us again.
Thanks for having me back. This was a great time last time.
Well, we are doing a special series on optimizing your time. CEOs get pulled in a lot of direction, whether it be, things on their calendar, maybe spending too much time in their inbox. I asked you ahead of time, what is the real most important thing you've done in the last year or so to really optimize your own time? What would you say that is?
I've been thinking about time a lot, Gene, and how important it is, especially with COVID, man. It's completely changed the game for everyone. And I think it's more important than ever to really utilize your time as to be what it is, the most important resource that you have. And so when I thought about my time, I really, through a lot of self-reflection, recognized that I'm best at project-based work. And the way that I think about project-based work is really, something that has a timeline associated to it, where there's a start, middle, and an end. Because I tend to do better when it's not some, elongated kind of forever, do this one thing and do it the same way forever. I just don't work well in that capacity. And I also don't think it serves a fast-growing company like ours. And so what I've really done a lot lately has identified what are some of the major challenges, barriers, opportunities we have at the agency that really I should be focused on, that's going to make the largest impactful, holistic change to how we do what we do. And I've put my time and allocated my resources to a handful of projects that I can really own. And then that way I figure out, okay, here's the challenge I want to fix, or here's the opportunity I want to go after. Identify that first. Then I reverse engineer everything else to say, what are the strategies and tactics to create this roadmap to get to this point? And then once I've done that, it really gives me a lot of clarity on what I'm doing. And then it also allows me to be transparent and communicative with my staff to say, here are the things that I'm focused on, so they can get a good handle on what's important at the agency.
I love that. We didn't even mention the fact that Digital Hyve is an agency that you've grown 13,000% in the last 6 years, 54 employees. So your time is pretty precious to keep this moving, regardless of whether it's COVID time or not, right?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I have to recognize, my time, really everybody's time. Being a service-based business, our time is our money, as the saying goes. And so we really need to ensure, specifically me as a leader of the company, that my time is being spent on the most impactful things that are both, urgent and important.
Just to take it a little bit deeper with this whole, identify a project, is this something that you're doing kind of with your team? Or are you doing it, kind of being the visionary of the company, going, this is the one area which, if we fix this, everything else will get easier, or something like that? Which approach are you taking?
We certainly would not have been able to, grow the company 13,000% if it was just me leading the ship. It might have gone backwards the other way, actually, just because I don't think anyone, I don't care how smart or quick or, clever you are. No man is an island. And I think that getting buy-in and collaboration is super critical in this process. I think my key function and role is identifying, because I have the biggest purview. I have the biggest, aperture into the business to understand all the complexities between different departments, different goals and objectives within those departments. And so I can kind of take that 10,000-foot view and identify, hey, this really seems like it's a challenge holistically across the organization. Once I get to that identification process and I start to create the roadmap, that's when I'll communicate to the team. I'll kind of share with them my vision for what we want to change. And then, of course, I'm going to need buy-in for how do we execute against all these things? What are some ideas that we can throw against the wall to see, all right, what's the benefit? What's the pros and cons against, this path forward to solve this problem or go after this opportunity? So yeah, absolutely. It's a very collaborative process that, and it needs to be that way, or else, we will, as a single point of failure, that's just never a good idea.
One more last question on this. You probably worked on a number of different projects because that's what you identified. Give us the, kind of one of those projects that really kind of you felt like moved the needle for the company, and tell us how that's worked out for you long term.
Yeah, and so I would say that one of the specific ones, probably the easiest one to point to, is we have had challenges for a number of years. So we've been in business, over 6 years now, and we've tried, I think we've at least tested over 50 different CRMs. We've utilized and bought into at least 4, and none of them serve all of the exact purposes that we were really looking for into it. And so when COVID hit, we identified that, this is really a time for us. A lot of our clients were paused due to all the regulations and quarantining. Our revenue was lower, which gave us some intentional time to say, all right, well, what are some of the major things that we can find some efficiency in? And so we said, all right, we've tried all these CRMs, and nothing is exactly what we wanted. So we found a no-code development platform, and we built our own CRM. My chief operating officer and business partner and co-founder, Jake, really owned the execution and creation of the CRM as more of the tech-minded person. And I worked with him to create some of the objectives and what it's really trying to accomplish for each specific department. Like, what can a CRM holistically do? If we had a blank canvas and created one just to fulfill every purpose we wanted, what would that look like? And we worked together to kind of figure that out. And now we have this awesome CRM. We just launched it, and it's worked already. It's solved a number of our problems. It's created at least, I think, 25% more efficiency within our account services department. Them hand creating reports and order forms and all these things are now just done in one beautiful automated CRM. And that's going to help us tremendously as we, continue to scale up.
Quick question to wrap this section up. Any thoughts on maybe selling that to someone else as a platform or?
Yeah, you know what? With all the work we put into it, that conversation has definitely come up. I think what we're really focused on right now is ensuring that it fits every need that we have as an agency. Really testing it, having our team work in it, fixing the kinks, and then once we kind of get it launched, I think there's a lot of agencies that have the same struggles as us. We know a lot of those agencies, and it's definitely something that we would consider, licensing or creating a product out of.
Well, I appreciate you sharing with us that one big thing that you've done to optimize your time. I want to switch gears here and ask you, as a leader, we're always evolving. We're always hopefully changing and shifting as the markets shift, as we grow. I know my journey as a leadership has never been over. What is the one area you're working on right now as a leader as it relates to your own time?
Yeah. So as I think about project work at Digital Hive, I think it's really critical that, to kind of go back to what I said earlier, our time is our money, right? And as a service-based business. And so I'm really trying to focus in on creating efficiencies for my time, because one of the things that, has been a challenge for us is, our capacity, because we've grown so much at a top line standpoint. We really focus on, like, our whole scaling model has been, all right, more new revenue, more new clients, that means more new people, and just kind of stuffing everyone into these processes we've built over the years. And we've iterated on them in, small, kind of incremental ways, but we haven't completely taken a step back and said, whoa, like, does this process even make sense? The way that we onboard clients, it's very structured, but should we be thinking about it in a different way, right? And so as the CEO and leader of the company, I've really been focused on, how do I increase the efficiencies in my team's time? Because that's going to be the most scalable thing, right? And so looking in each department to say, how are we optimizing campaigns for clients? How are we serving reports? Another example is about 6 months ago, or maybe 8 months ago, we switched over to live dashboards. Instead of pulling automated reports out of a dashboard and sending them manually to clients, we created live dashboards. It's just a much more efficient way, so that the creation of those reports and sending them manually, we took that time back, and instead are now using that same time to create much more deep dive insight into the campaign. So instead of just saying, here, a client, here's how your digital marketing campaign, performed based on this report that was sent from our analytics reporting software. Now, hey, client, go look at this dashboard, because it's live data. And we can supplement that time by saying, here's all the things we've changed over the month, and here are the results from those things, and here's how it's impacted your business. Here's the return on ad spend. We can get much more deep inside of the actual things that clients care about, rather than just sending some like PDF that people will probably never open, right? So, and that took a lot of work to create the PDF. And so it's about finding those different ways to better utilize our time, because then we're helping our team with capacity, and we're helping our clients with, information that's actually going to move the needle for their business.
So I know that you're kind of going back to the project thing, but what's the challenge you're having in this as it relates to your time?
I think it's about choosing the projects, right? Like, there's a lot of projects I could go after right now to just create, because to your point, Gene, our battle cry at Digital Hive is better every day. Every day choosing to be slightly better than the day before in some way. However small or insignificant it may feel, just making those changes and those iterations on a daily basis to compound, in a year, or 5 years, or 10 years, how much better you're going to be if you make these small changes to be better. And so for me, I'm obsessive over the idea that you can always be better. I don't care how well you're doing in business. I don't care how well a process is working. I don't care how good a new CRM looks and how shiny it is. We can always make it better. And so I think my mind gets cluttered with finding these cool opportunities, and probably no different than a lot of entrepreneurs chasing that, exciting new shiny thing. I think it's more about figuring out what's the most impactful, scalable, holistic thing that really needs to be focused on, and only choosing 3 of those instead of 10 of those. That's probably my biggest challenge.
Well, that gets more to the heart of it because one of the problems us visionaries have, and I work with a lot of clients in the coaching world, is we see an idea, we read something, and we can immediately see the impact that it would have in our company. But we can't do everything. We can't do, it'd be great if we could just have an idea and all of a sudden the team was able to pick up on it and execute. But you have to pick and choose. So, what is, have you gone through and thought about your filtering process to pick those top three things?
Yeah, to be honest, probably not as intentional as I should. I think that there's definitely opportunity for me. So part of the way I live my life in general is to have a rubric around all of my decision making, right? So if that's when I first started the business, I had a very hard decision between staying in the corporate television world and doing that, for the rest of my career essentially, or going off and becoming an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur was never in my sight line. I never thought I would be a business owner. It just wasn't in the game plan for me. But because I had a rubric, because I knew that I wanted to, two words are really important to me: growth and impact, because I wanted to continually grow professionally, personally, and because I wanted to have the largest impact on a select number of issues that I care deeply about. Because of those things, I felt it was a lot easier for me to make the decision to be an entrepreneur, because becoming an entrepreneur meant I had the freedom, flexibility, and the potential to be, financially independent, that I could make a lot of those to grow as much as I wanted to grow and to have the impact I wanted to have. And so it's an excellent question you just asked, because I think I can do a better job at putting a filter and a rubric together around the decisions I make. Because right now it's probably more gut than it should be. I think it should be more data based.
Let me take a second here to remind you that if you want to keep getting episodes like this, you want to evolve as a leader, then you want to make sure you go to genehammett.com/subscribe. genehammett.com is my home base. The podcast is Growth Think Tank. And if you want to be a visionary leader, if you want to keep learning from all of these amazing founder CEOs, then go to genehammett.com/subscribe so you don't miss an episode. My job is not to solve the problems for you, but to have a conversation that allows you to see it for yourself. And a lot of people don't understand coaching from that perspective, but here's the beautiful part of it. It wasn't me telling you you have to have a filter or a rubric for this. It was you realizing, you know what, I've kind of just been running by the seat of my pants or my gut. And so I want to spend the rest of our time together, maybe just helping you craft what that looks like for you. Again, I'm not trying to reveal any special secrets or go deeper than you want to. So let's just finish this up with some getting very specific around what that rubric is. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I couldn't agree with you more. There's never, no one will learn better than if they teach something themselves. Right. And I think that was an excellent question.
So you said something and I wrote it down in my notes here because that's what I do when I'm scribbling down here. I could be more intentional. So know that you're probably intentional about a lot of things in your life. You're intentional about the growth you have, probably very intentional about the people you bring on and invite to your crew. I remember that was one of the things you call all your employees crew. So what are the 2 or 3 areas within these big projects that you're looking at to improve the efficiency of time spent on the work done for clients that we need to start with?
So when I think about work with clients, I think there's a number of things that we do just because we've always done them that way. And there's nothing that bothers me more than doing things just because we've always done them that way. So, one example of that is, how do we create a filter around how do we do creative, and who gets a certain level of creative? When do specific creatives get involved? And what I mean by that is we have a hierarchy around our creative team, no different than any of our departments. We have a creative director, we have an art director, we have graphic designers, we have copywriters, we have developers, we have a number of different people on our creative crew. And how do we insert them into client work? When does a creative director enter the chat, so to speak? And when does when does our creative director allow our art director to take over direction over a certain campaign? I think understanding those nuances is important, because often it turns into, a client that has an urgent need would just run in and do it without a real filter, without intention. It's just, yeah, this makes sense. Or maybe it's based on capacity. This designer makes sense to work with this client because they have time rather than they have expertise in this specific field. And so I think getting more intentional around how our creative department fits into our client work is something that we're trying to be thoughtful around.
I want to back up to this because I've done a lot of work with digital agencies, and creative is certainly a big part of it. But there's also kind of the the process. Do you look at those when you're looking at something like this, and go back to the dashboard, the live dashboard, which I happen to love because I'm a numbers person. I'm an engineer at heart. That was my education in school. But to be able to push that out to a client, it wasn't just about creative. It was about improving a process that was taking time and automating that in a way. So there's process and there's people. What else would be included in this rubric besides those two?
It's an excellent question. I think about time efficiency around like really two things. It is that it's automation or, um, people. And so I think there's opportunity to create automation inside of a process, uh, and or be more intentional about how our team spends their time. Um, I think about creative. I think about, to your point around digital agency work, the way that, I always say this, anyone can run a Facebook ad, anyone can run a Google ad. So why would you hire a digital agency, right? Like I can teach anyone in 20 minutes how to run a Facebook ad. It's not complicated. The real secret sauce, the real value that an agency brings is their ability to optimize those campaigns and look at data, become numbers focused, and say, we're going to drive down your cost per acquisition by X by testing out different creative, testing out different headlines, testing out different copy points, testing out different features and benefits. And that work is time intensive and very skill oriented. And so branding, to speak to another thing that we're focused on, is branding our optimization process, because that's really the value that we bring. And so, Gene, I don't know. To go back to your original question, I'm not sure in terms of a rubric how to think about it. That's the majority of what we really focus in on is efficiency through automation, efficiency through operational processes, which can include automation, and or people focus.
So let's pause right there. It could be just start with these three because a rubric, as you know, can change over time.
Absolutely.
But if you want to create this filter that immediately, you have to probably, the way I'm kind of envisioning this, Jeff, and correct me if I'm wrong, is this a process, more process than people, or is it more automation than people? Some kind of like numbering system that allows you to go, where is it in the mix of those three? Is that fair?
I think it is. And then I think on top of all that, you kind of spurred that, included in that rubric needs to be impact, right? Like there needs to be some level of understanding, if we're going to put all this time and effort into it, what's the impact? How many departments does it impact? How many people does it impact? How many processes does it impact? And what is going to be the efficiency that we're going after? Because there should be some kind of KPI so we can measure against ourselves to say, was this worth it later on? So then we can get, to your point, create a better rubric.
So you said those things together, and I want to make sure we don't combine things that don't need to be combined, but keep them separate. It's impact versus effort, right? Because there's some projects that are probably low effort, but a pretty good impact payoff. Absolutely. And there's some projects like CRM systems that are high effort
Very high effort.
and unsure what the impact would be. Because I'm sure you were like, can we create a better system?
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. We were literally putting the airplane together in the air as we were flying it with that one. So you're right.
So you've got this like kind of, maybe it's a 3-step system that you work through this, where you go through, really what is defining what the problem is, right? Then you've got to go through is it a process problem, a people problem, an automation problem, or some combination of those? And then you kind of finish it up with how are we going to measure impact versus effort? And if you did all 3 of those kind of separately and walk them through with very much intention, would you be able to filter through all the projects in front of you with a little bit more ease?
I believe so. I believe so. I think that, it certainly is. I think that's comprehensive. And another thing that I'm being really intentional about is that I also know about myself that I'm very fast paced and I'm quick to make decisions. So one thing that I'm also trying to do just as a part of this that I think the rubric could help with is that I think it can help to slow me down for a moment because so often I see prior to kind of this way of thinking, I was the stereotypical leader that you came to and I'll solve your problem for you. I'm fishing. I'm not helping to teach you how to fish, right? And so, because of my decisive mind and my just deep desire to want to make change quickly, but at the scale that we are today, that can be almost more detrimental by making a very fast decision that can have spider, webs into very large impact. That you're not necessarily thinking of. So I love that idea of the rubric. I think those three kind of things can help. And then I also think that it'll also make, create more time for me to think about, what is the true impact of all this and what's it going to affect?
That's a really good insight that you picked up on there because, you know, two things. You can actually solve the problem for your employees, but that's not necessarily the best path if you want them to take ownership. You mentioned the fact that your co-founder took ownership of the CRM. I'm sure you were involved in some way, but for them to have ownership was probably a real benefit to you.
100%.
And other projects that you may identify through this new process, this rubric of filtering out the, which ones should go forward and not. Slowing down actually is a really good thing because you want to make sure that you're not, putting too many cooks in the kitchen when you're trying to push out these projects. You want to slow it down to work on just the highest value stuff. I remember I had Jeff, no, what's his name? Papasan, the One Thing. Have you read that book, The One Thing?
I have, yeah.
So the one question they have in there, and I'm sure I'm going to kind of butcher that up, is what is the one thing that we must do to make other things either easier or not, no issue to that. That's probably one of the questions you put in this rubric. Like, what is the one thing that if we only did this one thing and only focused on this one project would make the most impact for the company?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great point, a great book, because it narrows down, I think so often, people, I just had this conversation with one of our department heads. An idea got brought up and they immediately started to get anxiety because they started to think about this huge project and all the deliverables underneath and all the steps and talking to their team and figuring all this stuff out. I'm like, one bite at a time, man. Just, you can't try to gulp that elephant. You got to take one bite at a time, focus on the one thing and then move on to we as leaders often try to take on these massive things and think about all the different facets. And if I did this and I did this and this and this, yeah, of course. But I think to your point, like thinking about the one thing that can make the largest impact, that's all about focus, and time is focus, right?
I want to wrap up today's conversation, Jeff, just maybe asking you one final question. You had mentioned that the biggest challenge you have going forward is selecting the right work for this kind of create more efficiency inside your digital agency. And developing a rubric. How will you put this into play as you carry out on evaluating the projects moving forward?
Yeah, I think it's about the creation of it, of thinking through and then testing. I really like everything in my life. I like to, because I move fast, I come up with a hypothesis, I create some information, I synthesize that information, and then I just try it. So I think being able to take the next project that comes across my desk that I want to make capacity for, I think allowing myself to take a moment to say, all right, does this make sense through this rubric? Am I looking through a lens of, is this more people? Is it more automation? Is it process? What kind of impact will it have? How much effort will it take? Thinking about all of those things will certainly allow me to make a stronger decision for it. So I think it's just about testing and implementing.
I might suggest this too, Jeff. If you really want to make this pay off for you, is to track it over time. Having a system, a notebook, or some type of of electronic system. I use my iPad for notes on everything, but being able to go back to look in the past, like, was I right? Were the assumptions I made on this appropriate? Because I know within my own work, I can think something will take 2 days, and I'm not usually right, to be honest with you.
Totally.
And I've got a factor that I have to multiply my ideas with, which is 3. I have to multiply the time by 3. And you could create this rubric, which is great. You can change it over time. I'm certainly not offended if you change it based on what we quickly put together on a napkin. But be able to measure over time how you're doing with that rubric, and really creating something that just you go back to every time you've got to filter an important project running through the system before you activate the team. And I guess slow yourself down and teach yourself how you really are thinking about these processes. Does that make sense?
It really hits home, because I think so often, when you're a fast growing company, you're like a race car, and you're gone, and you're not even thinking about the dust settling way, way, way back there in your rear view, right? But so often there's a lot of insight that you can pull from, did I turn my wheel this way? Did I, accelerate too fast? And I think I absolutely believe that looking in our rear view and thinking through and setting benchmarks to say, is this working, is the only real way and only shot you have of becoming more efficient and being more successful. Because if you don't, you're just going to keep testing these hypotheses, looking in a very small window of success or failure, and then making, long-term decisions based on short-term visibility. So I think that's a great idea and great point.
So Jeff, thanks for playing along with me here. Has this been helpful, this little coaching session on?
Yeah, I love it.
Something you're working with?
Extremely helpful. Thank you, Gene.
I didn't even realize that, as I started doing these, how would I pull it off? But I know that my job is not to solve the problem for you, but to ask questions, allow you to solve it for yourself, and really help you get more clear about it moving forward. And we just took something that was, a little bit of a challenge for you and put some clarity to what you do next, and created a way that makes this pay off for you long-term to optimize your time. I really appreciate you playing with me, Jeff.
It's been super valuable. I really appreciate the insight and the thoughtfulness, and that's what makes you a great coach, man.
Well, when you think about your job as a leader and CEO, I want you to think about the conversation I had with Jeff here today, because when you think about what you're doing and how you're prioritizing your projects, this will help you. But is there any other areas you're stuck in, make sure you go to the free content we have on my website, genehammett.com. You can find out more ways to become the visionary leader that you really want to be for your team, and what you really need to let go of today so that you can become that visionary right now. Just go to genehammett.com, find all the free resources you need. You can even jump on the phone with me and have a conversation about your business, much like I had with Jeff here today. So thanks for being here on the podcast. When you think of growth and you think of leadership, think of Growth Think Tank. As always, lead with courage. We'll see you next time.